The conference room fell silent as the holographic display flickered to life, casting blue light across the assembled faces of the Galactic Council's military historians. Martha stood at the back, her arms crossed, watching as the Vrexian ambassador gestured toward the three-dimensional battlefield recreation suspended in midair. "This," the ambassador announced with reverence, "is the tactical map from the Battle of Kepler 442, the turning point of the First Contact War, the moment we realized humanity was unlike any species we had encountered." Daniel leaned forward from his seat beside Martha, his weathered face illuminated by the display. At 73 years old, he rarely attended these historical symposiums, preferring the quiet of his teaching position at the academy. But Martha had insisted, and he'd learned long ago not to argue with his former student. The map showed fleet positions, trajectory calculations, and what appeared to be handwritten notes in several alien scripts. But there, in the corner, rendered in stark human letters, was something that made Daniel's breath catch in his throat. "Why is my signature on it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The room erupted. Chairs scraped against the floor as delegates turned to stare. Martha's hand found Daniel's shoulder, steadying him as he rose slowly to his feet. The Vrexian ambassador's facial chromatophores shifted through several colors: surprise, confusion, then something resembling awe. You are that Daniel? Daniel Reeves? From the cargo freighter, Meridian's Hope?" "I was a shipping coordinator," Daniel said, his mind racing back 50 years. "We were carrying agricultural supplies to the outer colonies when your fleets ambushed us near Kepler 442. Another voice spoke up, this one belonging to a Thracian military historian whose scales gleamed under the room's lights. "The records say a human civilian vessel somehow predicted our fleet's movements with 97% accuracy. They transmitted tactical data that allowed the human defense forces to achieve victory, despite being outnumbered 3-1. Martha squeezed Daniel's shoulder. She'd heard the story before, in fragments, late at night when her mentor had too much whiskey and not enough sleep. But even she hadn't known the full extent of it. "I didn't predict anything," Daniel said quietly. "I just saw the pattern." "Pattern?" The ambassador moved closer, his compound eyes focusing intently on Daniel's face. Daniel's hands trembled slightly as he pointed to the holographic display. "Your formation. It was efficient, logical, perfect for a species that thinks in three-dimensional space. But you were moving through an asteroid field near a binary star system. The gravitational eddies created pockets of space-time distortion, nothing major, just enough to affect trajectory calculations by fractions of a percent over time." He walked toward the display, and the assembled aliens unconsciously gave him space. Martha watched her mentor transform, the tired old teacher fading away to reveal something else beneath. "Here," Daniel continued, highlighting a sector with his hand. "Your flagship led the formation. It was the heaviest vessel, which meant it would experience the most drift. And here," he pointed to another position, "your support carriers were maintaining a perfect geometric pattern, which meant they'd compound the error. I calculated where you'd actually be versus where you thought you'd be, and transmitted those coordinates to the human fleet." "In 15 minutes, the Thracian historian added, her voice tinged with disbelief. "The records show you performed those calculations in 15 minutes, using only a civilian-grade navigation computer." Daniel shrugged, a gesture that looked almost embarrassed. "I'd been running shipping routes for 30 years. You learn to see the math in everything." The Vrexian ambassador's chromatophores cycled through a pattern that Martha's translator chip identified as deep respect. "We spent 2 years trying to understand how you did it. Our best tactical computers, our greatest military minds, none could replicate your achievement. We concluded that humanity possessed some form of precognitive ability, or hidden quantum consciousness. "I'm just good with numbers," Daniel protested. "No," Martha finally spoke up, moving to stand beside her mentor. "You're brilliant, and you saved 40,000 human lives that day. Why didn't you ever tell anyone?" Daniel looked at her, then at the assembled delegates, then back at the holographic map that still bore his signature. A signature he'd scrawled across the transmission file 5 decades ago without thinking twice about it. "Because it was just math," he said simply. "After the war ended, after first contact became peaceful, I didn't see the point in dwelling on it. I became a teacher because I wanted to help students see the beauty in patterns. In calculations, in understanding how the universe moves, war was just an interruption." The room remained silent for a long moment. Then the Vrexian ambassador performed a gesture that Martha recognized as their species' highest mark of honor. A full prostration, forehead touching the ground. "In our culture," the ambassador said, rising slowly, "we have a saying: the greatest warriors are those who need not carry weapons. You showed us that humanity's true strength isn't in your capacity for violence, but in your ability to see connections we cannot, to find solutions in moments of chaos, to transform the mundane into the extraordinary." Daniel shifted uncomfortably, clearly unprepared for such veneration. "I was just trying to get home. We had a shipment of winter wheat that needed to reach the colony before planting season." Martha laughed, the sound breaking the tension in the room. "Of course you were." As the conference continued and Daniel was surrounded by historians eager to hear first-hand accounts of that legendary battle, Martha watched with quiet pride. Her mentor had spent 50 years teaching calculus and orbital mechanics to academy students, never once mentioning that he'd changed the course of human history with those same equations. That evening, as they walked through the station's observation deck, Daniel paused to look out at the stars. "Do you regret it?" Martha asked. "Staying quiet all these years?" Daniel considered the question, his eyes reflecting starlight. "No. The war ended. We made peace. That signature on the map, it's not mine anymore. It belongs to history. I got to spend 50 years doing what I love, teaching kids like you to see the universe the way I do. That's enough." Martha smiled, understanding at last why she'd become a teacher herself, following in Daniel's footsteps. "For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice." "Good," Daniel said, turning from the window, "because I have a stack of ungraded exams waiting for me, and I'm pretty sure half your students still can't calculate a basic orbital transfer." As they walked away, the stars continued their ancient dance, mathematical and perfect, waiting for someone with the eyes to see the patterns within the chaos.